All right, Chris, pre-taped episode of Smackdown, but they fill these pre-tape shows sometimes with some fun pre-tapes. And we got a sit-down with Paul Heyman, CM Punk, and Roman Reigns. And I mean, there's some stuff to talk about here. As expected, some kind of uneasiness and tension with Punk and Reigns. Heyman probably not accidentally sitting a little closer to Punk than Roman. He was Roman and Punk are facing Roman. How do I do my hands here for people watching? I'm in a mirror. I'm not mirror image. I'm in.
I'll be move this way. I'll be Punk.
Okay, I'm Roman looking this way. You're Punk looking that way, and Heyman is right in between us.
Yeah.
So Heyman's a little bit closer to Punk, which I thought was noteworthy. I mean, nothing is accidental with the segment involving these people. And Punk 3 times, I think, said, "I didn't do this for you. I did it for Heyman." They talked about owing a favor afterwards. Roman said, "What favor?" And Punk said, "No, it's a favor that Paul owes me." Roman wanted to know what that was all about. And then Heyman suspiciously said, I think it, raised some eyebrows for viewers at home, said, "Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about it after War Games. Let's get through War Games first." And then Heyman looked away, which makes it seem like, he's got something to hide or something that maybe Reigns won't like. So Reigns stared him down, and then Heyman looked up slowly and almost kind of, I don't think he gulped, but, it was kind of equivalent to that. Like, oh boy, he wanted to get a read on Roman and seemed a little nervous. So they didn't answer anything for sure, but I think they raised some new questions. So there's that aspect of it. And then there's also just the aspect of, are they going to not address yet the changed phone number and Roman disappearing and ghosting Heyman for months? That was a big thing, and I continue to talk about it. I was always hopeful that would be a key storyline that they would go back to and address. It didn't get covered tonight. So I don't know that's my recap and some of my first thoughts. What do you think of it, Chris?
It's so many things for me. First of all, I have a moment always when I'm watching wrestling that my oldest daughter walks into the room, and it was during this segment, which actually was better than some of the independent wrestling that I watch, and I have some explaining to do after that. I also didn't like, it's funny, we talked about this before, but I impacted a lot of this, but the whole cinematic, we have a soundtrack in the background of this very serious promo thing. And you can do it once, but it was, this time, kind of caught me off guard. I think a lot of it, there are a couple things here. One is the Roman Reigns character or his chickens coming home to roost. He was such a ruthful, evil person that took advantage of all these people, and it's coming back to him. He needs CM Punk, someone who he's not friends with for reasons that his wise man doesn't explain to him. I agree with you. They didn't really go through some of the reasons why, Heyman changed his number, why Reigns neglected him for the very first initial part when Solo took over. Yeah. And I think they're hopeful that, I'm assuming that the Solo team is going to win. And therefore, some of those open-ended questions that you ask about won't actually come up because there'll be some bigger issue.
Yeah.
That'll be more pressing than the things that you mentioned. But I think really that they need to tie up those storylines. Because to me, the whole thing about Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns' relationship was Roman Reigns was always in control. He always told Paul Heyman what to do. So Paul Heyman,
very subservient, very lapdog, very whatever pleases you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Paul Heyman was like, "Oh, I'll tell you about this later." Doesn't fit any of the bloodline character for the last few years they've been doing this.
No, and Roman's been on a different kind of journey, obviously, and having Solo take over the bloodline and call himself the tribal chief. Roman has been, pensive, perhaps introspective, and watching him deal with this new lay of the land has been fascinating. But fans were, red hot for Roman when he didn't before he came back. I think they're still really into him now, but clearly the story isn't, yay, hey fans, you've been cheering for me. I love you now. You love me. Let's forget the past. I'm going to be a lead babyface. That's not the story they're telling. And some people wanted that. They just wanted Roman to show up and be like, let's kick some ass and it's going to be party time. And that's they're telling a story that's different than that. And I really hope they don't disregard. I mean, it will affect my, grading and overall evaluation of the Bloodline storyline in the big picture, which I've praised and have been, very supportive of. And I think it's been very praiseworthy and top shelf pro wrestling storytelling. I'll be really disappointed if the plot point of, Reigns ghosting Heyman and Heyman changing his number are not followed up on in a way that makes it a significant plot point, or at least a significant talking point that, like you say, Chris, at least gets addressed. If something big happens at War Games, I don't think they could just not bring that up. I've been talking about it for months. I've been waiting. I think a lot of fans have been waiting for those things to be addressed. I don't like fake drama that's just there to fill time or create a moment that doesn't have a payoff. But I don't want to rip on it yet. I assume it will happen. It just seems like, I don't know. I would have liked this segment more tonight. We'll get into the music and the production, which is a topic in the chat room. But I would have liked this more if Reigns looked at Heyman and as they were waiting for Punk, because for people that didn't see it, the segment started with just Heyman and Reigns, and they're like, "Where's Punk? He's late." And I just wish they would have just taken a second for Roman to go, "Hey, Paul, while we're waiting for your guy, why'd you change your number and not tell me?" And Heyman could have looked at him and said, "Well, we'll talk about that later." I mean, that would have been fine. Just show me that you prove to me you're going to actually address that more than a small loophole. And Heyman could have said, "Well, you didn't return my calls, and so, I don't know you anything." And there could have been a little tension before Punk walked in the room. They could have played it in multiple ways, but please address it.
Yeah, I think to me, those issues are really important because to me, if you're Roman Reigns, I've had the same cell phone number now for 24 years from a Long Island number. And to me, it's sort of like, if I'm Roman Reigns, it's like CM Punk has your number because clearly you called him. You're in conversation with him. You're not in with me. How are you my wise man when I can't get a hold of you and he can? You can't pretend that it's not a different dynamic in that relationship. You can't just ease past that like that's no big deal.
Yeah. It was interesting. Heyman said, my tribal chief. I mean, it's not like he's at least paying lip service to Reigns still being his tribal chief. It would have been noteworthy if he didn't call him that. But, the term, did Punk say our wise man, I think at one point or something like that? Like, yeah. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of mind games. It's fun. There's a lot to talk about with this. Let's talk about and I want to hear what the chat thinks about the key points that Chris and I are talking about that were not addressed. That Reigns ghosting Heyman and Heyman changing his number. How important is it to you that get addressed? Do you think it should have been by now? Are you okay with it? Not yet. No big deal. No reason to panic or be concerned. Do you care? Not at all, or quite a bit. The other thing that people are talking about, and I wanted to also, is the music. It didn't bother me. The multiple camera angles of the music didn't bother me as much this time because it was in a studio setting. And there was no the wide shot at the stadium at the Georgia. Is it Georgia Tech?
Yeah,
at that college stadium. My issue was they did wide shots showing them talking to each other. That supposedly was kind of like at that exact moment. But they then did close-ups of them from 3 or 12 different angles. Sometimes it felt like, and there were no cameras there. And I doubt they just had a camera half a mile away that has a super zoom on it. Like, I mean, that's the only explanation. Otherwise, it felt very like staged. Okay, we're going to film this 3 different times, like a sitcom, splice them together later. And that just didn't feel organic to me. So while it felt like it made Cody and Roman really big stars and it was larger than life and cinematic, and I know some people on Twitter were like, Emmy Award, this is great. I thought it, for the tone of what I look for in pro wrestling, what I truly believe is better for pro wrestling, which is sacrifice a little bit of that grandiosity for a sense of realism, that you can be immersed in something. Because people, I think, enter pro wrestling expecting the feeling of an unplanned but professional filming of events. They don't expect movie-like framework of things where you just know everything is post-produced. So with that said, that was my main issue. I think it just kind of took me out of the moment. This didn't, because it's in a studio. I expect there to be 3 cameras shooting, and the director live can say, camera 1, camera 2, whatever directors say, producers say. The music was more distracting for me than beneficial. And they had it with Kevin Owens earlier too. So it feels like it's sort of like you give them too much time in the studio with a pre-taped show and they go a little nuts. Like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Chris? What do you think of the music? I'll talk more about it.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it. One of the things I think I've talked to my podcast co-host Justin McCullum, Wrestling Coast to Coast. We watch so many different wrestling promotions that I'm trying to be very diligent on watching all the promotions the same, with a bit of an understanding that obviously certain promotions have more money than others. And to me, when I would watch, like, I watched a lot of TNA Impact, they'd have these like brawls in the background, like, you know, in the back of the arena, and they'd have music there. And it's like, well, these guys are fighting. Why did you decide to put music on it? And to me, I had the same feeling watching this promo between Punk, Heyman, and Reigns. It's like, okay, you're serious. You're serious, having a conversation, having an argument, but you want to have this like music background. The same thing with Kevin Owens, who's going over this gritty timeline of events going back years, but we need to have a cinematic score. It just kind of takes away the sort of realness of like, these folks are angry, they could fight at any moment. It puts a little bit too much of a Hollywood cheese on it, in my opinion.
And I think that's the word for it. Hollywood cheese. I don't know that I don't think there's more benefit than there is negativity. And I don't like, what is the argument for it? The argument for it is people know wrestling isn't real. So if we don't make it look real, nobody cares. Well, I don't think that's the actual argument. I think the idea is, hey, it's clearly a segment that was pre-taped. WWE does all kinds of production work with videos, and we see it all the time. This is just one of those instances, but it does seem to enter a zone where it becomes a little like, I just think some people look at that and they see it as a distraction. It makes something that in and of itself feel organic suddenly feel like that we're being manipulated into feeling emotions due to the music that the moment itself organically should be giving us. And we don't need that extra oomph with the music, and we feel maybe a little manipulated. I think at the core, that's kind of what's happening here. Like, you're telling me with the music how I should feel with over-the-top dramatized post-production. Just let Punk and Reigns and Heyman work their magic. They're great. And don't post-produce music on top of it afterwards.
Yeah, they're big enough stars. The storyline, obviously, the biggest storyline in wrestling. CM Punk's a big star being added to it. You know, there's conflict there between him and Roman that's kind of unstated in the WWE world, but kind of in the background from a kind of famous podcast around Thanksgiving, I think 2014, I think.
10 years ago? Yep. We're actually going to, Greg Parks and James Caldwell did a whole show on that, and we're putting that up tomorrow on the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast feed, the blue feed. So they've got like 2 hours, give or take, of analysis of that going up tomorrow. So everyone hit refresh tomorrow and they can hear that. I'm going to dig up my initial response to it and put it up for VIP members too, I think. So 10 years ago this weekend, I remember it screwing up Thanksgiving weekend a little bit at the time. There's, I don't know. I had unwittingly something to do with why it came out when it did, and I've never told that story. But anyway, but I have to remember if I'm allowed to say how that happened. But anyway, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, you don't have to say that now. Don't want to have to break any news. But I'm not in the news breaking business myself. I know you are, but not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's funny because I remember listening to that like in the morning, waking up. 10 years ago was when I got married. So it was like probably a month after I got married. I'm like, oh, what's this podcast? But that's with CM Punk with his then friend Cole Cabana. For those of you who don't remember, Art of Wrestling, he had a podcast for his first conversation after leaving WWE, his last appearance at the January Royal Rumble, which I was at with Rich Fan and Justin McCullum and a couple other friends of ours, back when people liked Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think the thing for me is, like for me, and we'll get this later, like my favorite part of this of the show was Tommaso Ciampa's promo, not because it was the best promo in the world, but like he sounded like a real person.
Mm-hmm.
He was like frustrated, and some of the things that I have, this is maybe the gray in my beard showing, that like wrestling people need to be upset and angry and annoyed, and they may not always say the perfect words, and they may not say everything the right way, because in real life, if you argue with someone, they're not going to say everything perfectly. And so like his frustration of like someone who, you know, whether it's justified or not, you could kind of see his point, and he was very clear, as opposed to this kind of movie, we're trying to make a mini series, we're trying to redo 24 type deal. I just didn't work for me today.
And, Paul Heyman, and I think he was required by the pay-per-view company. When ECW went on pay-per-view, you had to like tell them everything that was going to be said and done. Like, I know Joey Styles got tons of notes, if not exact words to say when he would stay till 5 a.m. for the 1 hour ECW shows and post-production back in the day, pre-WWF buyout of them, of course. Heyman has a history of like really micromanaging projects and scripting things to the word and really, I mean, I don't know how else to put it, micromanaging. And so the segment with Cody and Roman and the segment tonight has that vibe. I genuinely don't know how involved Heyman is in the tone and the production of this. But it does have some of his fingerprints on it, as let's get this right by making every single thing that we do something we plan ahead. And then what happens is it feels a little too polished, a little too Hollywood, and it loses some of what you like, Chris, in the Tommaso Ciampa interview, which is a real person without the perfect words, without background music, without dramatic pauses that sort of feel like they're milked half a second too long. I mean, I'm with you. I wish they just had enough confidence to do it in one take, try to do it in one take without music. I mean, I'd be okay with one camera angle, to be honest. I think it'd feel more realistic. But I mean, I'm okay with the 3-camera shoot as long as it doesn't feel like they shot it 3 different times and spliced things together. I want to talk more about it by getting the chat involved and reading some of the chat comments on this. But let's pause first and formally introduce ourselves. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, November 29th, 2024, the day after Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving who celebrated that yesterday here in the United States. I am Wade Keller, host of the show and the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter and the website, PWTorch.com. If you are not a VIP member, now's a great time to go VIP. We'll have a post-Survivor Series VIP roundtable tomorrow night. PWTorch.com/GoVIP is the way to go. The way to get all the information you need on becoming a VIP member. We have plenty of ways to sign up. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Full VIP membership is available with credit card, debit card, or PayPal. That includes unlocking 35 plus years of archives, almost 40 years of archives, actually. And on-demand access to 20 years of podcasts, including 20 years of post-pay-per-view roundtable podcasts, our back issue collection dating back to the late 1980s, so much more. Full details listed on that page. You guys, if you're regular listeners, know that. Support us, and we'll give you a lot in return. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. We're also on Patreon, which you can access through Spotify, by the way. Just search PWTorch VIP in Spotify, and that should bring up our Patreon membership. Or you can go right to patreon.com/PWTorchVIP. One final way to sign up, again, it's all detailed at PWTorch.com/GoVIP, is in your Apple app. If you're an Apple app user, if you're an Apple Podcast app user, search PWTorch, and you'll see a charcoal gray VIP logo show up. Subscribe to that for free, and then you can upgrade to get all the VIP shows. So lots of ways, depending on what ecosystem you're in and what format you use and what device you use. We make it easy for you. Check it all out. My co-host on tonight's show, Talking Smackdown, is Chris Maitland. He is a PW Torch podcaster, part of the PW Torch Daily Cast lineup. Chris, welcome to the co-host chair.
Thank you, Wade. First of all, I'm wearing my Pitt shirt. Pitt beat Ohio State in men's basketball today at the buzzer today, which game is available on Peacock. I know a lot of you are going to watch Survivor Series before it starts. You can go there, see that last second shot by Zach Austin in overtime.
Last second buzzer beaters there's game 7 overtime goals in the NHL are like top shelf stuff, late touchdown pass with the clock running out, or if you're Chicago, you just let the clock run out while you just hang around. My God, what was that?
I have no idea.
I was talking to texting Zach Cadorn about that last night. My God,
I feel bad for any Bears. I mean, I'm a Jets fan, so I'm in really no place to question anyone's football team. Yeah. But that was a disaster, especially, I guess, because it's on national TV. I think when you're a team like the Bears, you're not on all the time. They actually came back and had a pretty good moment second half. And they just sort of like, I mean, I was like washing dishes, and I'm like, why are you not calling timeout? Like, if I'm not paying attention and I can tell there's a timeout, I don't know why the head coach is, but he's been fired anyway. So.
Was he fired today?
He was fired today, yes.
Oh, I didn't. I was lost in my own world of holiday stuff.
Though,
So, well, good. He should have been. That was crazy.
coincidentally, after his media obligations this morning, in which he said he would be coaching against their next game against the Niners, and
Oh, wow.
typically, I guess on national TV games they have availability the day after, and he did it. Did his availability this morning and last night, obviously after the game, and then was fired a couple hours after. So, not sure the reasoning behind that. But I'm Chris Maitland.
Wow. Sports talk is over.
Yeah, I talk all the time. I'm Chris Maitland. I co-host Wrestling Coast to Coast with my good friend of 25 years, Justin McClelland, a fellow Pitt graduate who texted me that was crazy when Pitt hit the game-winning 3. We cover independent wrestling, and we joke that we cover pretty much every promotion but AEW or WWE. We've been talking a lot about AEW and WWE the last several weeks with WWE ID program, going over identified wrestlers, as well as the GCW Ricky Starks AEW situation we talked about on this week's show. We also covered DPW Deadlock Pro Wrestling's World's Strongest show, which was in their North Carolina-based promotion. The show was in New Jersey. And next week, we're talking about a joint Progress Defy Wrestling show, which took place today in Brooklyn, New York. So there's me and Justin on the screen. And we talk about different promotion every week to say what we like, what we don't like. We've been going over a lot of the WWE identified wrestlers. We covered a lot of the initial 10, but now we've gone into folks that we're not even familiar with. So we're going to be covering them more over the shows, as well as a lot of shows coming up in the end of the year, going to next year. And our show usually comes out Wednesday nights on the PWTorch Daily Cast feed.
So it's easy. Just search PWTorch in your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast app you use on your Android or Apple phone. And you'll see the colorful PWTorch Daily Cast logo pop up, different color for every show, different show every day of the week with different hosts, different themes. And Chris and Justin do a great job with Coast to Coast. If you want to get up to speed on things going on outside of WWE and AEW, as Chris says, they're your people. He's your guy. Check it out. There's the 90s Passcast. There's the NXT show. It's just the whole line. I won't list all the shows, but you can check it out. We put a link up at pwtorch.com also if you want to stream the shows directly off the website rather than subscribe on a podcast app. All those shows, by the way, have skipped commercial breaks, and the in-house ads get edited out if you're a VIP member, and that's part of the VIP feed. One other note, by the way, we our VIP feed went down earlier in the week. There was a plugin that did a software update, and they changed something, and it screwed up our custom coding. We fixed it, and I don't know. We got it fixed. So everything's up and running again. We also implemented something some VIP members had requested, which is splitting off shows that cover current events from our flashbacks and our nostalgia shows. So if sometimes you're on a long car ride, you want to listen to nostalgia shows, but they've pushed off the screen because of off the listing because of all the current shows you've been listening to that have been posted since. So now you can get all the shows, but split into two separate feeds. So when you want to keep up on current events and all our coverage of that's on one feed. All our flashbacks, our 18 years ago vaults, our nostalgia shows, those are on a separate feed. You can still get them all in one feed if you want. You can also customize them per show. But if you want to have two feeds only that cover everything, that's a new feature we added per request from VIP members. All right. Let's so I said I want to go to the chat and about the opening segment, and I will, but since Rivers is waiting for us in the waiting room to be a caller, we'll go to him first, and then we'll get back to the chat. If you are a VIP member or Patreon supporter, you can find a link to be a video caller or audio caller. You can turn your camera off. That's fine too. In my Smackdown report at PWTorchVIP.com or on our Patreon page. If you're a supporter, you'll have access to the caller code. And we invite any of you who listen to us on delay, if it works for you, to watch us live and be part of the show and join us to plan to do that in the future after Raw, Dynamite, or SmackDown. All right, Rivers, welcome. Good to hear from you. What's on your mind about tonight's episode of SmackDown?
Hey, guys. How are you doing tonight?
Good to hear from you.
Doing well.
There is no need to rush to me, but while I'm here, I will,
whatever.
Say my piece.
We're good. Yeah, thanks.
I was, first of all, about the Punk cinematic segment. Wade, I disagreed with you the first time they did this with Cody and Roman.
Oh, really? Okay.
Only because, and we tend to agree a lot, or at least I agree with you a lot, but to me, that and the KO segment seemed like something a real life promoter would put on to promote an event or a fight. Now, whether that's a good route for them to go down is different, but in my mind, I could justify those as being real. Whereas this one, I think, was much, much worse because it wasn't it wasn't promoting an event. It wasn't promoting a fight. This was a conversation between two people or three people that had no need to be produced. The other things I could see someone producing it. There would be no real world reason to produce what was happening there. So for me, this was way worse than the other ones that you seem to like worse than this one.
I mean, I think that's not that you need me to validate your point of view, but I think that's a valid point of view. Like the one really came across like a promotional video. Hey, everybody, we're going to do promotional video. Show up, stand here, say this. I would still argue for pro wrestling. I'd argue for boxing and MMA. I don't like it either. I like more organic hype. Pro wrestling has this sort of baggage and stigma of being a con. So I think wrestling fans ought to be, and maybe it's waning, maybe not, a little more sensitive to something that seems fake in a way that we're not supposed to notice. And I think we enjoy watching shows that have a little bit more of a realistic, immersive vibe to it. But if you're used to those in MMA and boxing, and heck, I mean, they do it for other sports too, two quarterbacks, and they're clearly posing for cameras and promoting a national TV game or playoff game and all that. I get what you're saying. I'm not on your side on it, but I understand that perspective. And I also understand that, hey, this is not a promotional video. It's just simply filming a really important meeting after a huge angle that did massive social media numbers last week. And it like the original video, well, not the original, but the Georgia Tech Stadium video felt like it was meant to be, go viral and be super buzz generating. And all the dramatic music here, it did sort of feel like, Chris, that's what they were going for. It wasn't just for us watching it on USA Network, who are going to watch the show start to finish every week. And also with the music and stuff, seemed like it was meant to kind of have a little extra flair, a little extra pizzazz to hold people's attention as it circulates on social media too.
Yeah, I feel like that was what they were going for. I don't know if that's necessary because, as you said last week, just CM Punk showing up was enough. Though I do agree with a lot of what River said. It was funny because I think I liked the Cody one, Roman's in the stadium. I think because they hadn't done it before, so I think it was the novelty of it. And I was like, oh, you do it once, it's not that big of a deal. Going back to it again, what is it, 2 months? Not even 2 months later, to me makes it seem worse because it's kind of like, okay, now we're going a bit too far. And again, for me, as I said before, I would watch these things in Impact, kind of similar things, just be like, this isn't necessary. Especially as River said, this is just a conversation. Why the music? Who put the music in the background? I mean, I can understand. Like Kevin Owens has his dossier of events that he wants to go through, so he's gonna showcase this happened on this happened on that date. Yeah. You can almost imagine him sitting at his computer on a Wednesday night at 1 in the morning editing this together. In this instance, you really can't see that.
I also think the first video between Cody and Roman, the kind of grandiosity of it added to it. I think the Kevin Owens one, the ability to go to video replays of past things that happened added to it. I think for the Heyman Roman Punk, it should have been in the ring. I think obviously they weren't there or whatever, but I think it took away from it, the fact that it was post-produced rather than added to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they also just wanted to have something that was spoiler-free to put on the show, right. With everything else, or, the in-ring stuff being pre-taped. This was a way to say, no one's going to be able to tell you a week ahead of time what was said and how it went. So that might have been part of the motivation, but I think Heyman's very tempted to pre-tape stuff and, again, kind of micromanage and I would argue overproduce to, a grandiose scale that takes away from the realism.
It makes sense that this was pre-taped, but I wasn't really thinking about that.
Yeah.
Because for the first, say, half an hour, I thought there was some really clunky things which I thought they wouldn't have, that they would have caught in the pre-tape. I thought the promo at the beginning, I don't think it's anyone's fault. I just thought it was pretty disjointed and no one was really into it. I think it's mainly because this shouldn't be a War Games match. And it's kind of made even more egregious by the fact that the other War Games match is almost tailor-made to be a War Games match. So I don't think the crowd are really into the whole women's segment at the beginning. But then also they missed or didn't get a great camera of Shinsuke taking off the turnbuckle pad. And whatever happened with the mist to LA Knight's face, I had no idea what happened at first. I thought he'd slipped or something because it was so close that you couldn't really see the mist. And I just thought that if those were the best camera angles they had for those things, then it's weird that this was a pre-tape. You thought with a little bit more time, they could have shown those two spots better.
Chris, what do you think about that? I'll just say I thought the women's segment I thought they did well what they had to work with, which is each side saying you guys aren't going to get along and we're going to take advantage of it. Oh yeah, well you're not going to get along and here's why you're not, or we don't think you will and you shouldn't. And so I thought they got that across. They each kind of got their speaking lines and then a wild brawl. I thought for a match that does feel rushed and I don't know, yeah, just pieced together at the last second. What they did is they took what was a negative about that match and turned it into as much of a positive as they could. Because the criticism is, why are these people teaming together? Well, now they're marketing that these people don't get along and they're not likely to get along, and that's a key factor in the match. The Nakamura turnbuckle pad, I don't think it needed to be on camera because it would have seemed suspicious to be filming him in the corner. They don't usually film the victim or the target. They usually show the person who's getting ready to do a move. So that might have actually felt like oh, how convenient. For once they showed the guy waiting to be hit instead of the person who's about to hit him. I think that's why they did that. I didn't notice the mist. Chris, your thoughts?
Sorry, mute button. Yeah, I think for me, the opening segment, I kind of was waiting for them to fight at some point. I felt they were going too much. You can't trust you. And but I do have sympathy for them, though, because I think they're in a tough spot like that. I mean, again, maybe it's the old school of me. You're not supposed to have 2 War Games matches on one show. It could have just had a traditional Survivor Series match, and you could still play up to that element of them not getting along. I think they did the best that they could, but sort of like Nia Jax. It's kind of weird Nia Jax being kind of like the mean girl, even though she's like bigger than everybody else. Like, oh, you dummy, you idiot. It's like, okay, it's kind of a unique twist on her character, but I'm glad they finally got physical. With the turnbuckle pad, they did miss it. I think sometimes WWE doesn't want to be blatantly obvious with it. I think the key though is that the announcers immediately mentioned it. So even though if they didn't see it and maybe it was a miss in production, they go immediately to saying, oh, this is what happened. Same thing with the mist. Even if you don't see it properly, the announcers are going right in, immediately explaining it. So I think that's really important in making clear what they're, what the angle intended to do.
And I'll reiterate, I think it felt more realistic that the camera wasn't on Shinsuke and we didn't see what happened. They could have replayed it to show us, and that would have felt like, oh, we had a camera, just the director was shooting the guy who's about to do the move, as we always do. But no one was paying attention to Nakamura because Cole was like, Nakamura's devious. And Grace like, well, I don't know, might have been accidental. Grace was kind of trying to not cover for Nakamura, but the announcers were going, we think that's what he did, but we're paying attention. We weren't paying attention to him, before it happened. So I don't know. I feel like it wasn't the result of I could be wrong, but it didn't feel to me, Chris and Rivers, that it was a glitch. It felt like they were trying to make it feel realistic, like it was so unplanned. We weren't even thinking of watching it happen or show it happen. And we didn't even see it happen. So we're just speculating as it's happening live.
That makes sense because I think maybe it stood out to me because I didn't see it coming. In fact, I didn't know what happened until I saw the turnbuckle pad and then realized retroactively what happened. And then I'm not used to that. So maybe it is a good thing, but it definitely stood out to me as something to mention. It was new the way that they did that. Just a couple more things. Did they mention why the Prime logo was on the mat. Don't they usually just have that for pay-per-views?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I noticed it, but I didn't think beyond noticing it. Chris?
I didn't even pay attention.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's money poorly spent then if you're Logan Paul, because
the Prime is popular. I see in the supermarket all the time. I didn't realize how big it was when you see it in real life, but I wasn't paying attention to the logo.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. And I'm a fan of Carmelo. I thought he looked good against Cody, but he did look like someone who is going to look good but not win for the foreseeable future. I'm just wondering if you guys agree with that, or if he can, or what they can do to kind of make him into an actual threat rather than just someone who puts up a good fight, looks good, makes the other person looks good, but ultimately isn't going to do anything important.
He's good in this role, Chris. Do you think he should get more than this in the short run? I mean, the long run, who knows? But
I think it's hard. I think the problem is you can't push everyone at the same time. So someone at this point has to do that. And he's also losing to the world champion, so he's not losing to someone who's not invested in the company's not invested in. He's not losing to lose. I thought he did a good effort for what it was. I think he had a good series with Andrade. He was just in the it was a crown jewel match with LA Knight and Andrade, the US title. I think he's in a pretty good place for someone who's, in my mind, was on the independent wrestling scene 4 years ago. I think he's in a pretty good place, but I think it's going to be hard for him at this point. I mean, he's someone I feel that could maybe be in a better place when there's like a brand split and there's like a different combination of people. He could maybe slot into a different role.
Yeah, I think the line is you can't push everybody all at once. I don't see this as a Barrow Rivers. It just comes across as he's new and he's not a priority, but they're giving him some TV time. I mean, he's holding his own with Cody, even though losing clean. I think there's a spot for – there's no shame in having that spot on a roster, but if you're a bigger fan of his and want him to have more, I don't think this precludes that from eventually happening. It's just not yet time.
I think it's just a worry that for some people, you want them to come in and make an impact or not be there.
Yeah.
So then when they come in and make an impact, it's a big deal. Whereas if, he spends, a year losing, but putting up a good fight, it's a bigger hole to get out of, to turn him into a winner.
I'll put it this way. If I'm Carmelo, I don't think I would show up every week resenting this push and thinking I should get a much bigger push. It'd be nice if he did. Doesn't seem like it's like, a crime against the slot that he should be in. I mean, I think it's reasonable to slot him here, as an agitating mid-card heel who you can have a good match with, but he loses against people Cody's level, who's a world champ, and wins sometimes. He should get some wins against other mid-carders. If I'm him, I'll take this and the paychecks over being held off for some indefinite period of time when maybe the slot opens up for somebody who doesn't leap off the screen as a clear top-tier guy. Like I said, there's no shame in earning, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, wrestling and being looked at as a good hand who can make your opponents look good that you lose to, and you get some mic time, and you're not buried because he's holding his own against a world champion until he loses. I mean, this is I know what you're saying. I mean, if they're going to hold him off for 1 year and give him a mega push, and you think he deserves that, then this is not good. But if that's not in the cards for the next 3 to 4 years, if I'm Carmelo, I want to be on TV doing my thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys. I was just say, on a personal note, my partner's been away visiting family for Thanksgiving, and in a retro move, I got COVID, so I've been on my own for the last 2 weeks. So whether it's calling in, emailing the fix, or listening to PWTorch VIP, I think I've spent more time with the entire team than I have with a real person for the last couple of weeks. So thank you guys for that. I appreciate it.
So your partner's staying away from you because you have COVID?
No, she just happened to be away for Thanksgiving.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I mean,
And
it makes sense to stay away. I just didn't know. 2 weeks seems like a long time to be.
I was planning on a nice, relaxing kind of couple of weeks by myself, and then the day after she left, I got COVID.
Oh, geez.
So then
okay.
also couldn't leave the house. Yeah.
Well, sorry to hear that. Yeah, it's very retro, but I mean, it's that time of year too. I mean, shouldn't take for my son's musical director said, if you're traveling for Thanksgiving weekend, I'm not supposed to, who knows, said, I can't tell you have to wear a mask, but it'd be a good idea because I don't want anyone to lose their voice because the performances start next week. So I know there's even cold cough, anything it's there if you're going to be, especially come after all the travel this weekend and people in close quarters and intermingling. I'm sure there'll be a spike in everything late next week. So,
sure. All right.
Anyway,
cheers,
get well.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. All right, cool. By the way, speaking of the women's match, Brian emailed, said, "Hi Wade, I have an idea for the monotony of a man and women's war games match each year. In a nutshell, this year should be the men's. Do the Bloodline Saga. The women, however, should instead have a traditional Survivor Series elimination match. The next year, flip the script. Simple solution with nostalgia built in yearly." I'm a little behind on this week's podcast, so forgive me if this has already been discussed. We did bring that up last week, actually, Brian, but it's a good point to revisit. Chris, after watching the segment tonight, tell me where you were before and if it changed afterwards in terms of how you feel about this being a War Games match instead of an elimination tag, which is I think a suitable, legitimate, viable alternative to wedging a second War Games match onto the show. Is there enough with Nia and Liv and the Tiffany Candice situation, and then obviously there's probably something going on with Bayley. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. There might be something going on with Bayley, or at least whoever attacked. It could be Belair too. Whoever attacked Jade, that could come into play in War Games, and maybe it's important to have them in the cage. It'll make more sense afterwards if there's some sort of a turn. But in generically speaking, I like the idea of the War Games only happening when it seems a few calls for it, as opposed to it's that time of year, we better assemble 2 groups of 5.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think the whole premise of War Games is not supposed to be just like a regular wrestling match. They're regular wrestling matches. They have tag team matches and 6-person matches and 8-person matches all throughout the year. But this special unique match involved a cage and all this kind of violence back when violence wasn't, I guess, the same as it was now, is for only special reasons. The Bloodline, you can see why they're going to this point. They've had different matches that led up to this point. These are just people that are thrown together. And I don't know if they just didn't want to have the story of the men having a women's the men having a War Games match and the women not. But the match doesn't have the reason to have the kind of physicality and the kind of violence that you expect in a War Games match. If it was a 5-on-5 elimination match, you could do a better job of the same story. You could probably have a lot better outs because you could have people counted out, people running in based on the fact that someone doesn't trust someone. You could do that, but in the War Games, you make it actually harder to have that because they're going to have people running into the cage and that type of stuff. So I just don't think it's necessary. And what they did today was a good effort for what they had, but it didn't make me any more excited for a War Games match for the women. Yeah.
Couple comments from the chat room. Sadler version 3 says, yeah, that women's promo was bad. It felt like an old Vince segment. I complimented it in my TV report, knowing some people are going to say it was bad, and I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I just thought it was it made sense to me. I mean, you have 2 groups of 5, and they each, everybody kind of, well, almost not everybody spoke, but the people who spoke were trying to drive a wedge and highlight awkward interactions of the recent past and distant past for everybody involved. And I mean, I thought it worked. I mean, my standard for certain things in pro wrestling is really high, but I don't think a go home promo a day before pay-per-view, or days before pay-per-view, where everyone gathers who's in a match and they kind of take turns talking back and forth. I just don't think you can throw that you can, but I don't feel the need to throw that formula out. I wish Liv didn't do that weird laugh. That takes me out of it. But I'm fine with a formula, people gathering and each person, everyone just kind of listening to the other person talk and then rebutting them. I didn't think it was bad per se. Let's see. Glenn B says in the chat, I like all of the women involved. I really think Nia Jax has moved up a few levels, but it just feels like Ripley is going down a level here, to be honest. I disagree in the sense that she's coming out and she's getting the biggest pop when she comes out. Like there's 10 women and Ripley's more over than Bianca, more over than Bailey, like these long-term stars who preceded her. To me, I think she's looking fine, and she's speaking like she's the captain. And they're you're saying us to Belair and Bailey, who are really big established stars, and then you're opposite of Nia Jax and Liv Morgan, who are the world champs. I mean, I don't see how Glenn sees this as Ripley going down a level. Maybe he wants to elaborate, but what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not sure why. I mean, she was the one that led the charge after all the conversation. She was the one that just basically said, all right, let's fight now. We're not going to talk anymore. So I think her getting her hands on Liv is the main focal point of this match. So yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a step down for her.
Junaid points out, did anyone notice Bailey was clearly distant from the other four, especially when Liv brought up how convenient it was Bailey took Jade's place? But I hope Bailey stays face since her turn from being a heel to a face was recent. Yeah, it kind of sucked for her to turn again. Liv said, what'd Liv say? Used to be, you've lost your touch and you used to be good, but you're not anymore, or something like that. It felt like a little bit of a comment somebody might say on a podcast about Bailey flailing since her ding dong era. Walking through the door during the speaking of COVID, during the COVID era. But yeah, I noticed a little bit of the body language with Bailey seemed a little more distant. I didn't read into it definitively, but it felt noteworthy. It did feel like she wasn't just like body language wise, like all for one for all, but she is the latest edition. So my hunch is it was intentional and meant to plant a seed that could be a red herring, or it could be portending what's to come. And I think it's open either way. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think she kind of stood off at the side. She didn't actually cut an initial promo. Mm-hmm. The other four baby faces did. Though for me, I'm trying to think of the storyline. Why would you injure Jade Cargill to get into a dangerous match? Like if your issue, this is one of those things where I know the dreaded words in wrestling are let it play out, but I would have to see like why. Like if she attacked someone in the match, couldn't she have attacked them at any other time? Why would she have to go into War Games to do it? Though I do think they're setting the seeds of her being a bit on the outs or a bit aside from everyone else. But I want them to be very clear on why. What's her motivation for doing all this? Hope that becomes clear for the show.
Yeah, why would you want to be in War Games at the last? Like, I mean, this does kind of get to the core of why does War Games exist? It's the only way to settle a feud is to put them in the cage, and it's the most dangerous match in WWE changes seasonally, depending on whether it's time for War Games or the Hell in a Cell or the Elimination Chamber. But it is, regularly, consistently described as one of the most dangerous matches. But yeah, what's Bailey's motivation for knocking out Jade just so she can get in this match? Now, maybe the motivation is trapping wrestlers in a cage, and they're not suspecting she will turn on them, and she does, and then she has a numbers advantage when she does it. I mean, I guess there could be, the way it plays out, Chris, maybe some way where it looks like some sort of master plan playing out.
Yeah, I mean, possibly. I mean, again, it's one of those things where, like, I'm trying to think, if she's trying to get back at Io Sky, for example, why didn't she just attack Io Sky? Why would you get into this match? Because again, logically, I could get hurt. I could be the first person in this match. I could get seriously injured in this very dangerous match. If my goal was to take out one person, why would I put myself at risk to do that?
Yeah. Junaid adds, is the elimination match at Survivor Series considered antiquated now? After all, we need Adam Pearce and others to yell out loud, it's time for War Games. JC Scooby says women's War Games should have been 4-4 instead. Well, we'll see. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what they have in mind when it plays out. I don't think it has. I mean, the match would be a little bit shorter, and I don't think it always has to be 5-on-5. Chris?
You should wait. I should ask you to give the context for this because obviously been covering wrestling for so long. When I was a kid, back when this started, I loved Survivor Series matches. I loved the randomness of these teams together. And then when I found out, when I started, learning more wrestling, that it actually drew poorly for several years, and that's why they started adding. I can't remember what it was in SummerSlam. I can't remember what SummerSlam when they added like a singles match. It was in 92 maybe or 91. I was like, why is there a singles match on Survivor Series? It's supposed to be all these people. But I think it takes away. I think because now you only have 1 or 2 matches, there needs to have a reason for them to happen. When you just have just everyone on the roster is going to be on this match, you're going to throw people together. But I think you want to have a clear reason for why, of one of these 2 special matches, there's a reason why these people are actually going through this when they don't have to.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. And I mean, the Survivor Series was just a filler pay-per-view meant to drive Jim Crockett Jr. out of business, to give cable companies a show to air instead of Starrcade 87, and it worked, and it helped put Jim Crockett out of business. But it was meant to be a bunch of tag matches, filler tag matches, because they didn't want to give away the matches that they actually were making money on at house shows. So they just threw a bunch of random tag matches together, and it was a novelty. But it was just a filler pay-per-view. And formula-wise, I don't mind 1 match per pay-per-view, but doing a whole show of those matches still wouldn't draw. I just don't think they care as much about. They know they can't get $50 or $60 or $70 from people for a bunch of elimination tag matches, but I think they don't. They know no one's going to not watch Survivor Series if there's one old school style elimination tag match on a 3-hour show. They clearly aren't worried. They're not counting nickels and dimes like they used to in that way. With the way things are set up now with Peacock. All right, more on the women's segment. Sadler Version 3 says, Rhea stood out the most and was the biggest star. Darrell says, could the women's war games be used to spawn a few different stories that could lead us to Mania, and that's why they put it together? Yeah, I mean, it might not be why they put it together, but certainly when you get all those women in the ring together, there's going to be multiple stories coming out of it, right, Chris?
Yeah, I hope there should be. That's kind of the purpose of it. But why War Games, not an elimination match? I mean, again, going back to the Survivor Series, thinking about the whole Bret Hart-Owen Hart feud really started at Survivor Series when Owen Hart was the only Hart eliminated against, it was supposed to be Jerry Lawler, but it wasn't him. It ended up being Shawn Michaels and the Knights. So you can start feuds in a regular match. My own question is, why does it have to be War Games to start those feuds? Yeah.
By the way, you can read our coverage of all these Survivor Series from over the years in the pre-podcast, pre-internet era Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter back issues dating back to the late 1980s. So go VIP and lose yourself in tons of rabbit holes of a website that's been around almost 25 years now, and a lot of incarnations that you can just keep clicking and eventually get to like an old format. You're like, oh, this is what it looked like in 2004. That's cool. This is what it looked like in 2002. That's cool.
I was in college and look at me now.
Yeah. We haven't deleted like anything. I think everything is there. If you just keep clicking the special features section and the archive section, pretty soon you're like lost in the woods, but it's fun. I do that sometimes. I'm trying to pull up old stuff and I'm like, wow, that was our logo back then. So anyway, all right. Derek Hubbard says the last 2 years have been the Rhea character building years. It has worked to the biggest degree. 2025 needs to be the year that Rhea builds her in-ring resume. She is more than capable. I think she'll get that chance if she can stay healthy, Chris.
I'm sort of in-ring resume. I don't know what that means. I guess that's good for like some fan, but she's like currently the biggest women's star in WWE. She has probably big potential feud matches with Bianca Belair, and maybe Tiffany Stratton, maybe others I'm not even thinking of. So
Charlotte,
I don't know.
Becky, who knows?
Yeah, Charlotte, Becky. I know she wrestled them before. She wrestled them again. For me, that's kind of like we haven't even talked about the main event, but I kind of had this sort of thinking about, when we started doing Wrestling Coast to Coast in 2022, and one of the people I really wanted to see on the Indies, I had a list of people, and one of the people I really wanted to see was Jacob Fatu. Never got to see him on the Indies, but now he's main eventing on SmackDown. And then he's wrestling against I think that if that's one of the top merchandise sellers in WWE right now, Jey Uso, who for
along with Rhea, getting some of the biggest pops in this company, and Cody,
who for many years, was in a tag team, and half of us didn't. Is that Jay or was that Jimmy? They're twins.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like that's important, of course, to have good in-ring matches, but I think the important part is actually being seen as a star, and she's got that part down. So the matches will be good, but I think she's got the hard part down already.
Yeah, and I think maybe what Derek's just getting at, maybe replied in the chat. I haven't looked, but I mean, there's something about being really over, and there's another about building a resume, not from a drawing power standpoint, but just kind of your legacy. Are you a top wrestler who then goes out and has epic, memorable matches that people talk about for a long time against fellow top stars? And, I mean, sometimes the order's in reverse. Some wrestlers have their better matches before they become a big star. Rhea's in a position where she, the Judgment Day thing and just her in general got over big, and she's good enough, and there's enough good women wrestlers. She could have a couple of years of really, really good in-ring matches. I mean, where, people talk about this as a Rhea Ripley era of just one showcase match after another that really delivers. I hope that's the case. And again, it's about her staying healthy enough for it. Rivers, who called us up, entered the chat and said, regarding the women's promo, they did an okay job with a bad situation. They're selling a War Games match that probably shouldn't be a War Games match. So, I mean, that's fair. Saying they did a good job with a bad situation. And Derek Mitchell says, Rhea's already won the Royal Rumble and multiple world titles and tag team titles. I think her resume is solidified. Well, that's the you've been booked to win resume. The other resume is, do you earn the respect of your colleagues and the fan base by having, as I just said, a string of 2 years of matches that people talk about for a very long time. And that's cool to aspire to that if you're Rhea, I mean, there's the titles the promoter decides to give you, and in a way you earn them because of crowd response and their thought that you can carry the show. But I don't know. I'm fine with her also doing the good match part of it too, Derek. Okay. Michael Gross pulling up some memories here. He goes, I remember calling the show in 2016 with you and Jason Powell, Wade. I asked if Survivor Series should be rebranded, and you both agreed it was it was the something of the top four. Is that a word? Snant? And War Game Day carries it. So, I mean, had they retired the concept when it wasn't over, when fans didn't look at it, yeah, I mean, they could have come up with a new Thanksgiving theme, but I'm kind of glad it's still around now. Derek, in response, said, yeah, I think Rhea's already gained the respect of the fans and peers, in my opinion. Well, sure, but I mean, Derek, I think her best matches are ahead of her, and let's not discount that if she spends the next 24 months being the top woman wrestler and having really, really, really good epic matches, one after another, that's going to be different than the last 2 years of her career. And I think that's what Derek Hubbard is bringing up. She turned into a star, but now it's time to pay that off with staying healthy and having like one good match after another. I think there's more for her to accomplish.
Yeah, that was the one part I think I mentioned was staying healthy. I think that's a big part of having those great matches is being able to be in a position to deliver them. Yep, totally.
Then Junaid says, I think the reason Bayley was not in sync with her teammates was because Rhea got to come out last and got the biggest pop. I don't know. I think Junaid were reading into some just kind of the positioning and the body language at the time. Junaid adds, by the way, Rhea versus Charlotte at WrestleMania is one of the greatest matches of all time. Yeah, let's stack them up. Let's stack up a dozen or 20 more the next couple of years. That's all we're asking for. That's all we're asking for, I say. All right. Let's go to Jason D from Australia giving us a call. Jason, welcome. Good to hear from you. How are things going?
Not too bad, Wade. Good to speak to you too, Chris. Look, just regarding Rhea, listen, she's the top female wrestler in that company. She can't help who she's been booked against. And also her characters, she's one of the top stars in the whole industry. So she had, as Junaid pointed out, or someone pointed out, she had that epic match against Charlotte. I mean, she can go in the ring. We all know that. I mean, she's she's one of the best sellers in the whole company, just the way she sells with her body movement and everything. So she has the ability to have tremendous matches, but she can't control who she's booked against. And I can just imagine the booking team has said, this is more about getting your character over. You're going to get more over as a character, and you're going to be more value to us as that star. And all the epic clips and photos that she posts on social media, she can have a great match if she wants to. It's there. She's the top one there. So she can't help who she's been booked against.
I feel like people think Derek Hubbard said Rhea means nothing until she proves to me the next 2 years she can have 20 great matches in a row that everyone gives 4 or 5 stars to. That's not what he said. He just said she's really over. If she stays healthy, there's a lot of great talent for her to have a whole string a whole stack of really good matches against. I think that's his only point, is like she's really positioned to add to her resume that's already formidable and tremendous in a short period of time. So I didn't, not to frame what you said, Jason, incorrectly, but like Derek, I don't think was trying to say, she's got to prove something to me still. I think he's saying she's so good. This is the phase where now they can really make money off of her because she got her character over the last couple of years. And of course, when she's been healthy, has had some good matches.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know what Derek was saying, but I just, it's, you can tell what they're trying to do with her. It's almost like her in-ring talent. Like she's got enough there. It's all about getting the character over and everything. But I understand what you and Derek is saying.
And Derek added, Jason, real quick, she's my favorite female wrestler character. I want her matches to live up to her character in build and execution. And I think that's fair. I mean, let her have it.
That's on the company. Like we all know that she can do it. We've all seen her in the ring. Like she's had some really good matches. I mean, that one against Charlotte was just sensational.
But Jason, it's okay to wish that happens
how much
without...
comes down to the performer, and how much comes down to the performer, and how much comes down to who she's booked against and her opponents.
But Jason, Derek is not saying it's totally up to Rhea, and if it doesn't happen, it's all her fault. I mean, I still think you're responding to something that isn't being said. He's saying Rhea and the bookers together. Let's give her an opportunity to do it. It's not like she's going to be condemned or get demerits if she isn't booked against good wrestlers. I think Derek's just hoping that happens and thinks she's prepared to do so and hopes the company puts her in that position.
Yeah, fair enough. I understand.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me trying to stick up for my fellow Aussie. That's all. Maybe my judgment's been a little bit clouded.
Well, there's nothing to stick up for. I think Derek's going, she's great. And if she's probably capable of having one of the best I keep saying 2 years. It can be 1 year, it can be 6 years. But seems if she's healthy, there's a whole run of great opponents and she's super over. Let's deliver a bunch of good matches. It's a call to action for her and the company to make it happen.
All right. So with the War Games, right, I've never been a big fan of this format because to me it's like the match only officially starts or the bell goes once everyone's in the ring. So after everyone's fought each other. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's almost like it renders everything that happens before the bell ringing being useless. I've never understood that. So I don't understand why there isn't an elimination. That you should be eliminated and the competitors keep coming out. I've never been a big fan of this format. And I really hope they do it 1 year where somebody gets incapacitated where they can't continue. So I apologize if they have done that before, but there needs to be something to this. I just don't like now the match begins. All right, so everything that happened counted for nothing. So everyone just beat the crap out of each other, and now it all begins because you can just imagine that we're going to have a scene where it's like, it's 5 versus 5. Like we're going to get a point where there's going to be a standoff, right? And everyone's all of a sudden fresh again. I don't like that. There should be eliminations. And the other thing that I'm not a big fan of, I mentioned this before, what are the stakes in this match, especially for the men? So they try to address that with Paul Heyman's segment with CM Punk and Roman Reigns, where he says, Punk, you're interested in this because if Solo is able to take out Roman, he's going to come for you. I get that. So are they saying that if Solo's team wins this, they get the bragging rights, which means Roman is going to relinquish his claim to be the tribal chief or whatever. Like it's sort of, they've gone halfway with illustrating what the stakes are, but I would prefer it if there were greater stakes. If you're going to war, it has to be more than bragging rights. What is tangible that's on the line?
Well, I think you probably know my thinking, Jason, on this, but maybe not. I think winning a match should be framed within a company as important enough to not need a special stipulation all the time. I think bragging rights needs to be enough. It doesn't mean it's as big as winning a WrestleMania main event or being a world champion, but being part of a winning War Games match, I think should be enough. That's my argument for the Continental Classic. Like you don't need to earn a title shot if a world title shot. If you win AEW's Continental Classic tournament, it's just, you're the Continental Classic champion. Like that's a round robin tournament. That's a proud notch on your belt. That's something on your resume. I think being part of a winning War Games match is fine. I don't think you need to have, stipulations for every match that go beyond bragging rights. Like I I think you want fans to think winning a match in and of itself is worth fighting for and enough of an honor. What do you think, Chris?
People, there you go. Yeah, so I agree. I think the whole purpose of it, or the problem with wrestling nowadays, is it used to be simple that winning and losing mattered, and that obviously people that won a lot, it was just kind of inherently in it that they would get title shots and other opportunities. Here we need to have stipulations, money in the banks, number one contenderships. I think the whole Solo Roman thing is about power, and it's about beating the other one. And as long as Solo wins, he has what Roman has. He can hold it over his head. They don't have to officially fight for it specifically. It's just kind of known that they're competitive. They want to win. They want to beat each other as well as all the other people in the match. And so I don't think they need to really state anything. I think it's just part of their overall appearance with each other, and the fact that they don't like each other, want to get one up on each other, and the best way to do that is to beat the other side in the match.
Jason.
I see what you're saying. I disagree, and the reason I'm not making a blanket statement that every match needs to have a stipulation. What I'm saying is that you're going to war inside a cage. This is a massive match where you've got two big teams going against one another. To me, okay, maybe they'll have a bit of time to explain this, but bragging rights where do the bragging rights lead after this? So if Solo's team is victorious and they leave Roman's team laying, what does that mean? What is stopping?
Yeah.
It has to mean something because you've gone to war. That's what I'm saying, Wade. Like, this could be any other match, right? I'd be agreeing with you. But if the concept of war is that you're going to war and there's going to be consequences. And what are those consequences? I hope that they flush this out and lay it out. Now, perhaps the consequence is going to be that Solo now has defeated Roman twice. He defeated him in the tag match. Now the Rogue Bloodline or the New Bloodline's defeated the OG. Maybe they go to Saturday night's main event and the true tribal chief is on the line, like the Ulafala or whatever. Something has to be on the line. But I want to see ramifications and consequences coming out of this victory, not just nothing to come out of it, because you are going to war. That's my whole point. I'm not trying to make a blanket statement.
I think
this particular point.
Fair enough. That's a good clarification, Jason. I will say this. I think winning, if Solo's team wins War Games and WWE wants to tell a story, that matters enough to give Solo legitimacy as a tribal chief, and that causes distress with Roman, and it leads to tension with Heyman, and maybe a quip or a comment about Punk not carrying his weight or Roman not carrying his weight. We have to see how it's booked. To me, it propels the storyline forward well enough for me, where it's not official stakes, but it's like an NBA game where there's the best defensive player in the league going against a really good offensive player in the paint. It's like, well, it might not decide the game, but there's a game within the game. And so the War Games match is sort of the game within the game of the larger story of what's going on in WWE with world title shots. And, the somewhat subjective, there's not like an official rule book for who's the tribal chief. But it does seem like there's sort of honor among thieves that you got to perform well and win to make a case to be that with a straight face. I think they've told that story well enough. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing about the Bloodline, good and bad, is that it kind of is bigger than anything else, and so it's kind of in its own universe, for lack of a better word, when we talk about WWE. And so this is at a point where they need to push forward in where they're going to kind of further. I'm assuming a Solo Roman singles match at Royal Rumble once and for all. I think that this will just be and maybe to Jason's point, War Games was at one point the end of a feud, and people moved on after that. While at this point with the Bloodline, it looks like it's not the end. It's going to be, I would say, the middle, but it's going to be really a transition to something else. And maybe I agree with you there that it should be an ending point. But I think really the goal is to set up to kind of that stipulation, those stakes that you talked about, Roman versus Solo for the undisputed head of the table. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Jason, back to you.
Now, I see what you guys are saying. It's just, I think we're kind of on the same line here. Where I do agree with you, listening earlier, is about overdoing it with the production, with the sit down. Like you said, Wade, Roman, Paul Heyman, and CM Punk are big enough stars where they don't need music. They can just tell it with their body language and their ability to cut great promos. So, yeah, that's overdone. Like, I hate this term, this is cinema and all the rest of it. I think we've gone too far with that. Like, I'm not interested in watching cinema. I'm interested in watching pro wrestling done really well. But on their part, they're thinking, we're going to put this on social media. It's going to have the music, and we might attract some more extra eyes that are not overly thinking about it and going to get caught into it. So I can see your point of view and my point of view, and I can see theirs. So I'm kind of like, you know what I mean? Maybe this isn't for me, but it doesn't mean it's not for everyone else. You know what I mean?
I think if their response is nobody's going to not watch because we overproduce this segment, and maybe some people will take notice because we're overproducing it, or producing it with such a to such a degree they wouldn't admit it was overproducing necessarily. I mean, you can't argue with that, but you can still defend in a broad sense the desire for an immersive experience as the default, and there should be a really good reason to take you out of it and make it just feel too shined up. I mean, sometimes it's just like, I mean, I always, come from journalism background. It's like reading an article and like, I just want black letters on white background with good use of words, good grammar, good sentence structure, picking, good cadence to the writing. Like, I don't want bolded out and big colorful letters and all caps and pictures in the background. Like, I'm not 6 in kindergarten. I don't need the teacher to hold the pictures for me. Like, just to me, good writing is black letters on white paper or screen with someone who's really good with words. And to me, like, that organic experience of reading a really good writer is enough. So to me, I will apply that to Roman Reigns, Paul Heyman, and CM Punk. They're 3 great characters right now. I don't need flourishes of, I don't need my eyes with hearts on top of them. I don't need words underlined. I don't need, if the font is 9, I don't need it to be 15 when someone says something. Just let the words speak for themselves. So that's my preference. I think I think some people might need this. They don't need it. I think it takes away from it. And I'd argue the same. I think the stadium and Cody and Roman was enough. And I just wish there was one handheld and one wide shot. And when they went to the wide shot, you saw that guy with a handheld camera. And I wish it felt like it was shot straight through. I get what Rivers is saying. Hey, it's a promotional video. Wrestlers know that's part of the game. And they partook in multiple takes. And really, Wade, are really people thinking of this? I'm like, well, I don't think they're overtly thinking of it. But I think people have this sort of inner sense of if something feels authentic and organic and immersive, or they're trying to manipulate my emotions and they're layering things on. And now it just feels overproduced, not like something real was just filmed. I think that's a feeling people have. And I think my preference is I think fans enjoy it more when it's more organic and immersive and realistic.
The other thing, one thing that I really like is how they reference things to the past. Like, I really enjoyed Kevin Owens' promo, talk and going to specific dates and everything. So once again, reiterating that everything we watch is important, even from a couple of years ago. And then I like the fact, and I apologize if you guys brought this up, how it was either Michael Cole or Corey Graves brought up how the Shield were originally brought in to be CM Punk's mercenaries from 10 years ago. Like, they made that point. So this is what I like about the story. What is the favor that Paul Heyman is going to grant CM Punk? So what power does Paul Heyman have from a storyline point of view with either matchmaking or whatever to help CM Punk out? And also, like you said, Wade, and I thoroughly agree with this, I really hope that they do cover their base with why Roman Reigns ghosted Paul Heyman and what happened with the change of the number. Like, they need to address this. This is an important point, and it can't be just ignored. They have to address it. And I have faith that they will. I think they've got that in their back pocket, and somehow it's going to play into CM Punk. So I have the confidence that they're going to address this, but they definitely do need to address it. I'll leave it at that. Wade and Chris, enjoy the show, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
Sure, Jason.
So is the favor Punk helped Roman fend off the new bloodline, and if he didn't show up and help, the new bloodline would have destroyed him 5-on-4 or whatever. And so now Punk wants a match against Roman. Punk wants what? Like what is the favor? Let the wise man manage Punk instead of Roman going forward until I'm not sure if Roman were the champion, then the favor if I'm reading this right could be Punk wants Heyman to negotiate a match with Roman for a title. But what comes to mind, Chris? I'm just kind of thinking it through and talking it through here on the spot without anything worked out.
My first thought was title shot, but that also is kind of at this point far-fetched because Roman's not the champion, so actually has to beat Cody Rhodes, and it's like, well, you could wrestle Cody Rhodes for the title instead. Though my whole thought, and maybe this is unique, I don't think they're going to win, and I don't think it's going to get to that. My whole thought is that something's going to happen. Somehow Seth Rollins is going to be involved. That's going to distract Punk, or maybe even possibly. Maybe, I don't think Drew McIntyre, but something's going to distract Punk. Maybe Seth Rollins. That's what the WrestleMania match, and so therefore that takes his attention away from this, and they don't win, and something else happens where they don't worry about Punk, which has to be something because obviously he would have maybe not been involved in the match, and therefore this "I'll tell you after we win" doesn't matter because they didn't win.
Yes. By the way, I want to go back to the chat for more comments. I've been promising it since early in the show. Do want to plug, if you want to follow me on Blue Sky, I'm at The Wade Keller. You can just search The Wade Keller in Blue Sky. It'll pop up. And also you can follow our brand at PWTorch on Blue Sky. We're moving our kind of main social media there. I don't do a ton with social media compared to some people, but we post alerts, and I posted my vegan Thanksgiving dinner, by the way, that I made.
I did see that.
People.
I'm on Blue Sky too. At mine with Maitland. I've only so far skeeted, I believe is the word. About I put up our show this week, and I talked about the Red Bulls' big victory last week. So I haven't done as much, but it's I'm not at that old place anywhere. I'm liking the new place so far.
Yeah, it's been a lot of movement there. In the last. This month, there's been a lot of movement there, and it's ready. I mean, it wasn't a ready product when I first signed up. Whatever a year ago, whatever it was, there just it was invite only, and there wasn't a lot of. And now, been a mass move over there, and it's very vibrant and a pretty. I mean, not that trolls won't show up, but it's a pretty positive place. And they tell you at the beginning when you sign up and remind you, don't feed the trolls. Even if you think you have a witty comment, ignore. Don't feed the trolls. Just let's keep this positive. And it seems like it's working. But yeah, I on Wednesday night on the AW Dynamite post show, we went like 2.5 hours or something crazy. And at the end, we started talking about Thanksgiving. And I'm primarily a vegan diet and have for about 16 years. And so we're talking about my plans for Thanksgiving. And I was like, there's plenty of things to eat. And then people are like, well, show a photo. So I did. So you can see my vegan turkey cutlet and mashed potatoes and sweet potato and corn and stuffing and homemade gravy. I'd made all of it. It was delicious. I've had leftovers last night. So I've had 2 meals yesterday and lunch today. So haven't gotten enough of it yet. How's your Thanksgiving, Chris?
That was good. We had some food here again with my parents, Andrew's parents, my wife's parents, and our 2 daughters, and so it was pretty good. And I watched a little football, which I like to do. I obviously went over the Bears debacle, and actually at night we went to see Wicked, the musical, after the kids went to bed. My wife's seen Wicked on the theater about maybe 8 times between New York, London, Columbus, Chicago.
Wow.
And she's seen the movie 3 times.
Wow.
So we enjoyed it, even though it's, Justin and I talk every week on our show about the length of wrestling shows, how long they are. This is about 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it's part 1. So keep that in mind. It was enjoyable.
Yes. Yep. And I had fun playing board games and charades, and it was a fun time. And 3 dogs got to exhaust themselves and play until they couldn't stand anymore. So it was a good time. Okay. Back to chat room. So here's some things that were said about the music and the production, which is a big topic on today's show. I like talking about this stuff. I think it's important how wrestling is presented, because they have total creative freedom to do whatever they want, and a lot of things have been tried. My inclination is, pretty stripped down. Organic is better. My black letters, font, 8-point, 9-point font on white paper is my argument for writing, and I think it applies to wrestling. When you have a good writer, you don't need bells and whistles. When you have the talent of Punk, Heyman, and Roman, keep it simple. So what did the chat room say? Adam Kidd said it was way overproduced, but that sit down worked big time. And by the way, I don't want my critique of the music or the multiple camera angles or anything to indicate I don't think it worked. I mean, I'm really intrigued by it, and it made me more intrigued. And I obviously have my issues. I want them to address the ghosting and the number change, and I want the favor thing to not just be blown off later, even if it's delayed, because as Chris pointed out, maybe something else big happens where it doesn't get addressed right away, but eventually it should. But I do think it worked. The question is, would it have worked as well, if not better, if it just was more organic? And yeah, that's my preference. Brian Bayless said, yeah, the sit down was too much community theater for me, but ultimately it will serve the fan base. Chris, let me ask you this. As good as Punk, Heyman, and Roman are, have you seen them stray a little too much into, hey, look at our acting chops. We're going to submit this to the Emmys. Look at how great we are with because it's good, but like you said, which like your argument with Ciampa is resonating with me. Like you want to see people acting like people, and Roman, Heyman, and Punk are acting like we are. It's sort of like how Cody dresses. Like it's very ostentatious. And there's an ostentatiousness to Roman's body language and Heyman's reactions. I think it's in the realm of working, but to me, it's pushing the limit of dial it down a little bit, because it's venturing into the realm of looking like it's like they say theater acting instead of movie acting, like ironically, because we're saying how cinematic they're going for and all that. But like there's playing to a big stage from far away, and then there's playing to a camera, and it feels a little like kind of almost theatrically for the camera instead of a camera just happening to film something that's real. And I think pro wrestling's at its best when it looks like a camera just happens to be there filming something that's real.
Yeah, I think that they have the benefit of that they're over as characters. And that this is the first time Roman's now done it twice, but this is the first time the three of them done it together. And I think you can kind of get away with it if you did it every week. Like again, Impact had this, mentioned that where they didn't have the same folks every week, but there was like almost every week there was one sort of story with music in the background that took you out of it. I think they have to be careful though, because it does get a little bit too over the top. I think one general thing with wrestling, again, let's say before, is that you want to make it seem that people are having real life conflict or acting in a way that someone would in real life. And too much of it is like, again, maybe theater overacting. I'm trying to get judged by the producer in the front row to give me a bigger role in the next show. And I know sometimes there are people in wrestling who are trying to get bigger roles in movies, especially now that I've seen several wrestlers that they wrestled with become big movie stars. But you have to be very careful. You don't want to get you don't want to take it too far, because once you go overboard, you can never come back.
Sadler version 3 says the dialogue was good, but the music was so corny. It feels like they're desperately trying to look like an Emmy-worthy program. Station says, I feel like they're on the wrong path by giving the cinematic treatment to important moments. And Standard Deviation added, the music did not give me chills, but at least the camera work was less invasive than in the Cody Roman football field incident. So maybe that's a sign of a philosophical adjustment. Brock Benningfield said, more drama than a late 70s soap opera. And Derek Hubbard says, the music was not a deal killer, but I do not think it was needed. That's kind of summarizes where I am. In some cases, awkward silence would have built more tension than the melodramatic music. Totally agree with that. I mean, don't be scared of silence. You don't want to overdo it, but I wouldn't be scared of silence either.
I also, for me, maybe I'm trying to think I remember now, the Cody Roman video was actually the day before Justin got married, September 20th. And I watched that on my phone in the car while the girls were asleep in the background while my wife went in the store. So I didn't watch it. I think part of it for me is like I did not watch it in the pro wrestling. I'm watching SmackDown. I'm watching only a standalone video. Yeah. And it was cool. This one, I'm watching the show, and it's like they're gonna, they hype it up. They're gonna sit down. They're gonna meet face to face. Like, all right, I'm interested in that. Then it happens. I'm kind of like, oh, okay. in this wrestling context, when I'm, LA Knight's getting misted and Ciampa's upset and the women are arguing, it just kind of didn't fit with that. And maybe for me personally, that's why I kind of viewed it a bit differently.
Yeah. I like it a little rough around the edges. So there's, table. I like that it was kind of gritty. Like it was a start, like the setting was cool. Like it didn't just a table and 3 chairs, but I just wish we had one camera and a boom mic and no music. I mean, I think that would have been cool, as opposed to having it in the ring. And again, they might have considered doing it in the ring if it was a live show, but they wanted to have a spoiler-free segment that was newsworthy. Glenn B says the music was goofy as F, but it didn't make the scene any lesser. At this point, we know and they know it's cinema. See, Glenn, I'm with you to a certain point, but to say we know and they know it's cinema, it's like, well, when I go to a movie theater, they know and we know that there's stuntmen and special effects and all that, but man, when you're in a movie theater, the goal of everyone in that movie is to immerse you in that world, so you're not thinking about the fact that, why are you getting worked up, why are you crying, why are you excited, why are you rooting for anybody, because it's all fake, it's all scripted, they're all actors, and when they yell cut, nobody cares about anything anymore. They just want their paycheck and go to their trailer and have some good food. You don't want to think about that stuff, even though we know that's true with a lot of actors, that they play the character, but they're not actually feeling anything, they're just acting. But just because we know that doesn't mean we want to be reminded of it as we're watching it. Like people say that about wrestling. I remember I say the story all the time. Ed Ferrara was like, well, everyone knows it's fake now, so we shouldn't try making it real. And I'm paraphrasing, but that's the spirit of what he said. And I'm like, wait, no. That's all the more reason. It's like, that's all the more reason. It's the reason is equal, really. It should always be as immersive and realistic as you can make it. You're not insulting. I think he said like, oh, we don't want to insult people's intelligence by pretending it's real, something like that. And it's like, no. Like, that's not insulting intelligence. That's giving us a really good show.
Yeah, that's such a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, when my wife and I live in New York, went to a lot of shows. We still go to shows here in Columbus. And when we're at a show, we're immersed in the environment. I remember this analogy, kind of wrestling. It kind of how people view wrestling. We saw the Tina Turner musical earlier this year. And the guy that played Tina's ex-husband, Ike Turner, did a really good job. Though, if you know the story, he was not a good character, but his acting was really good. And I'm sure after the show, if you talk to him, he probably was a nice guy. But like while you're watching the show, you have to like be into his character of what he's doing, and not like, he's a nice guy. We watched another analogy. We saw the Michael Jackson musical a few months ago here in Columbus, and we actually talked to the guy that played Joe Jackson, his dad. Again, you do some research, not a great man, very nice guy to talk to, but in the show he was playing his character, he's playing his role. I know he wasn't really him, but when you're in that arena, in that environment, you want to be immersed in it. And I think too many people want wrestling to be on this meta way, but you lose people because not everyone wants to watch it that way. They want to be in the world that they're in, and then when it's over, they move on. Yep,
exactly. Well put. We'll go back to the chat to wrap up the show, but I want to bring up, since no one else has yet, the Piper Niven Meechin Lash Legend match. Meechin wins in 10 minutes to advance. Not a ton to the match, but there was a Chelsea Green brawl at ringside, or Chelsea Green interfered, and then B-Fab came out and they brawled to the back. Chris, any talking points or thoughts on that match, and are you surprised Meechin advanced?
I wasn't surprised Meechin advanced. They had kind of hyped. People talked about the possibility of a Piper Niven Chelsea Green final, but B-Fab running Chelsea Green away put that aside. I think that, I don't know if it was Rivers, I can't remember, mentioned before, they missed a couple spots. They did miss I didn't quite see the senton on Lash Legend after she was pinning Piper Niven, but the senton's one of those moves that you can get away with actually not hitting someone, kind of the way it works. But I think Lash Legend was pretty impressive, and I don't know if she's still in NXT or on the main roster. I'm not quite sure, but she's someone definitely to keep an eye on in the future.
Yeah. And then also the LA Knight segment. We talked about the production of it with Rivers earlier, but what'd you make of the match? They created a little backstory. Andrade's mad that Shinsuke marched in and got a title shot. He thinks he deserves one. It's a good point. Why is Nakamura getting a title shot? But I thought the commentary was good in terms of trying to frame why Nakamura is acting the way that he is, and he was frustrated, so then he meditated, and then he realized he needed to take a different approach. Nakamura acted heelish, and he got a good win over a solid Andrade opponent, leading into his title shot, which adds a little credibility post being granted a title shot, gives him a little extra credibility that he is actually getting one tomorrow. And then we had the angle afterwards with LA Knight. I like the touch, by the way, of LA Knight being like a half hour later. They went backstage, and like trainers, doctors are like checking his eyes and giving him eye drops, and he's still got all the mist all over his body. And after the segment was over and Byron Saxton interviewed him, Knight just says, kind of as an aside, I got to get in the shower and wash this stuff off soon. Because it's like, why do you still have all this mist all over your body? Instead of having people like doing little eye drop stuff and staring at your face while your head's tilted back, just go take a shower and rinse that stuff all off. So I actually kind of like that he threw that in there. I don't know, if he came up with that or someone else did, but it was a fun little aside, which is like, are people at home thinking that? Like, why is this guy still covered in this stuff? Just go hop in the shower.
40 minutes later, yeah. I think I early think they should have done where he wrestled Andrade first and beat Andrade, and then demanded Nakamura, I'm referring to, then demanded a title shot, because it would have been like, I just beat a top contender for the title, because obviously Andrade won that tournament, or that best of 7 with Carmelo Hayes. Was in that match at Crown Jewel, and then get the title shot, as opposed to giving him a title shot, then having a match where he's going to win because he has a title shot the next day. So I would have done that in reverse. And I did like the fact that Ellie and I did say that, because it doesn't make sense. Like, why? I'm just thinking of someone, I have young kids. If they spill something, I got to clean it up immediately. I don't wait 40 minutes until Byron Saxton interviews me to take care of it.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the Kevin Owens segment? We kind of talked about it in the context of the way it was presented, but did you like the callback to 2021 and 2023, making the case, hey, Cody wasn't there for me, but he's there for Roman, so of course I have a right to be upset, and he deserves everything he has coming his way. And then he said with a little, I'm glad they didn't add a little like twinkle to his eye like in post, but he's like, I'm going to turn the American Nightmare into the Canadian Dream. And then he kind of clicked his, made a little clicking noise. I thought it's great, Kevin Owens, and I like getting a window into his mind. You can imagine him just, on every car ride, just not ruminating, but like getting all worked up over, the hypocrisy of Cody, and why is he more loyal to Roman than me? And it's a window into his mind.
Yeah, I think that was really good to show that he's, kind of on edge, and it shows why, because it's not like he just attacked Cody out of nowhere. It's like he had this thing stewing for a long time because of all these things that happened in the past. And again, I think the one thing that WWE does really good, I know people complain about the length of their premium live events, I gotta say that, but what they do is they also set up other matches that are important. So they have a big show December 14th, my dad's birthday, in the arena that I watched my very first wrestling show, the Nassau Coliseum, which I'm surprised isn't torn down now, because I honestly don't play there anymore. But for Saturday night's main event, and they're making a big deal about that, and they have a credible main event, and I think he did a really good job of presenting why he's in the headspace that he's in, and also presenting why people want to see him lose to Cody Rhodes.
Do you have a guess on who attacked Jade and how that will go?
My guess is going to be Bianca in some way, because I was under the impression they were setting up a match for the two of them, and this was kind of a way to do it.
Okay. The main event itself, Jacob Fatu, Jey Uso. Jey loses. What did this hurt Jey too much? Mark Paschetti says it did nothing for Jey. I think we can't criticize them for brave booking a clean loss. I think Jacob Fatu needs an aura about him. Jey is going to be popular. I don't think he's popular because he never loses. I think he's popular because people like him, and he's always in the fight. And he held his own. So I was okay with this, but what do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. I mean, I think Jacob Fatu has this aura and presence that, for me, as someone who followed him in independent wrestling scene, is great to see. It's also interesting to see him hit a lot of his big moves he did in MLW or in the independent wrestling scene would hit him in a way that they weren't all like rapid fire. There was this pop-up Samoan drop, the moonsault at different times of the match. I think part of it to me with the wrestling is like I feel like the heel team always starts. And I also know the women, I think the babyface team has the advantage there, which is different.
Yep.
So it was pretty much telegraphing that Jacob Fatu was going to win. But also Jacob Fatu is this person who has this aura, but not from inside the ring and winning matches. So he's been there for 4 or 5 months. It probably was time for him to get a win anyway. And Jey Uso is someone who can take a loss in these circumstances because it's just to set up the War Games match and nothing more.
Yep. All right. Anything else? I'm going to read a few more chat room comments to close out, but anything else from the show, Chris, I haven't thrown to you to comment on that you have on your mind?
No, I think other than it was cool to see the Motor City Machine Guns in the title belt commercial. That was cool for me. But other than that, that's pretty much it.
So Sadler version 3 says, Bianca doing the attack doesn't make sense since it happened during her match. Maybe you're orchestrating it would make sense. And Derek Mitchell says, my guess is Bianca Belair attack Jade Cargill and will be relieved like Triple H attacking HBK or Cass attacking Enzo backstage, deflecting. I think was Sadler's comment. It was revealed during the match, but it doesn't mean that her body wasn't discovered 15 minutes after the attack. So I would say to Sadler that option is still there. The timeline is enough but she also might have orchestrated something too. So anyway, just responding to that. Couple other comments. Let's see. Some of these already brought up. JC Scooby 1976 says those three, Punk, Reigns, and Heyman, don't need to be overproduced. We just want to hear talk. Derek Mitchell says, let's not act like WWE cinematic segments or Lucha Underground. And Glenn B says, for the record, I don't think it's good. It reminds me of Bold and the Beautiful more than an actual dramatic TV show. I just tuned it out. I question why they didn't do this in the ring. The crowd would have eaten that up. Punk, Reigns, Heyman live and with all the mics. Again, I really do think they might have considered that. Although I might be in love with the cinematic music post-production stuff. But if it was live, maybe they would have. To our discussion earlier, Sadler version 3 says, it'd make more sense if the winners of War Games got a title match or something. Then Bayley would have a reason to join the match. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you say the person who gets on the offense of getting the submission win gets something, but then that adds a whole selfishness to the element that I think belies the spirit of War Games, which is, in theory, 5 people who are aligned trying to just win a match by any means over 5 others. And then if you add a particular reward to just one of them, it changes it in a way that might inject drama that is distracting from the larger issue, which is why War Games should exist in the first place. Didn't
WCW have a War Games like that in the 90s where like someone got a title shot if they won or there something?
I don't remember, but I could be. Yeah. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, we'll wrap up there. I appreciate everybody joining us again. If you go VIP, you can hear my rundown of SmackDown, and also Raw and Dynamite every week, start to finish, on the Wade Keller hotline on the PWTorch VIP feed. I'll be recording that afterwards, but a lot of people listen to that first and then listen to the post show if they don't see the TV show. So in like 20 minutes, you can, give or take, you can get a full rundown of the 2-hour show with my thoughts on it. Join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for the Wade Keller post show after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. Check out my written report, even if you're not a VIP member, at PWTorch.com, including tonight's SmackDown. And be sure to subscribe, if you haven't yet, to the Blue Logo Show. We'll have that CM Punk Fallout show this weekend with James Caldwell and Greg Parks reacting to it. Like I said, my plan is to dig up my initial reaction to that too and put that up for VIP members. I know I did a long hotline, I think on Thanksgiving or that weekend, after listening to the whole podcast. It was quite the week. And of course, as everyone on YouTube says, please like the show, comment below, and subscribe to our channel. We thank you for that. If you're listening to us on a podcast app, please give us a 5-star rating and some kind words. It can help our search returns. And that is all, I think, all I have to say. So, Chris, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for joining me once again.
Thank you. We'll be wrestling coast to coast on Wednesday nights.
Yes. Search PWTorch in your podcast app, folks.